The CSS Perseverance was 41 years old and everyone knew what the assignment meant. The briefing had used different words. The briefing had said, rearguard action, holding position, buying time for the convoy to reach the jump point. Those were accurate words. They described what was being asked in technical terms that were correct and complete. What they meant was this: the Keth Sovereignty's interdiction fleet was going to arrive in 4 hours. The convoy carrying 11,000 civilians from the evacuation of Kurith Station was going to reach the jump point in 6 hours. Someone needed to be in that corridor when the Keth fleet arrived, and that someone needed to hold them for 2 hours, and the Perseverance was the only fleet vessel available. The only fleet vessel available, not the only vessel, period. There were 5 others in the region, but the other 5 were the escorts assigned to the civilian convoy, and the convoy's 11,000 people were not negotiable. The Perseverance was available because the Perseverance was old and her crew had been scheduled for decommissioning rotation, and she had no assignment in the coming weeks. She was available because she was what was left after everything else had been prioritized. Captain James Asayadaimi had read the briefing 3 times. Then he had called his crew of 112 to the ship's main bay and told them exactly what the assignment was in words that didn't use the technical framing. He said, they need 2 hours. We can give them 2 hours. The question is whether we want to. He had looked at 112 faces. He had said, I am not ordering this. This is a volunteer assignment, and everyone who wants off this ship in the next 40 minutes has my full authorization to leave with my full respect. He paused. This ship is 41 years old and she has 11 working weapon systems, and our shields were rated for situations that were less serious than this one. He paused. Nobody here owes the fleet a debt that has to be paid this way. He had waited. Nobody left. Tuan. He had looked at 112 people who had heard everything he said and had made a choice. And he had felt something that he would later find very difficult to describe in his log, and would eventually write only as, I understood what this crew was. He said, then let's figure out how to come back. The planning session lasted 3 hours and 14 minutes. Asayadaimi ran it, but it was not the planning session of a captain instructing a crew, applying everything they knew to the problem of how the Perseverance had limitations. They were significant and they were real, and the planning session started by laying them out with complete honesty. Because planning that didn't account for real limitations was not planning. The Keth interdiction fleet, based on signals intelligence, was 7 vessels, 2 heavy cruisers, 3 destroyers, 2 frigates. It was optimized for stopping a convoy, not for engaging a warship. The formation would expect to intercept commercial and civilian traffic. It would not expect a Concordance fleet vessel to be sitting in the corridor. This was the first thing. The second thing was the Perseverance's age. 41 years of service had produced a vessel that was behind current specification in almost every category. Her drive was slower. Her shields were weaker. Her weapons were an older generation. 41 years of service had also produced a vessel whose crew knew every system intimately. Not in the way of recent crew rotations who had learned from documentation. In the way of people who had been present for the repairs and the improvised solutions and the specific accommodations that a 41-year-old ship accumulated. The chief engineer, Amara Vasquez Nakamura, had been on the Perseverance for 9 years. She knew what the Perseverance's power systems could do that wasn't in the specification sheet because she had been there when those things had been discovered. She knew the drive could output 17% above rated maximum for approximately 11 minutes before thermal damage became permanent because she had done it once, accidentally, during a test that had gone further than planned. And she had spent for months repairing the result and had understood exactly how close the margins were. 17% above rated maximum for 11 minutes. The tactical officer Kofi Mensa SAS, knew the weapon systems in the same way. The port secondary battery had a firing rate modification that an armorer 6 years ago had made to compensate for a timing circuit that had never been fully replaced. The modification meant the port secondary could fire 32% faster than rated, at the cost of a 15% reduction in shot power. The ship's tactical computer still ran the standard firing calculations. Mensa SAS had been running them manually, accounting for the modification for 3 years. Every person in the planning session had a version of this story. Systems that worked differently from their documentation. Capabilities and limitations that existed in the crew's knowledge and nowhere else. At the end of 3 hours and 14 minutes, they had a plan. The plan was built on everything the Keth fleet wouldn't know about a 41-year-old ship with an experienced crew. The Keth interdiction fleet arrived at 0847. Their commander, Subadmiral Fesral, processed her in the Perseverance and spent 6 seconds on it. 6 seconds. Then she sighted one Concordance vessel, Class 3, old configuration. He paused. Their drive signature is weak. He paused. She looked at her tactical officer. Projected capability. Her tactical officer ran the analysis. She said, Pre-update Class 3, sir. Outdated weapons. Reduced shield capacity relative to current standard. She paused. Combat assessment gives us favorable outcome at standard engagement range with minimal losses. Vethral said, they know we're here. Her tactical officer said, they would have detected us on approach. Yes, sir, Vethral said, and they're not running. Her tactical officer said, no, sir. She looked at the Perseverance on her display, one old ship, sitting in the corridor. She said, they're buying time for the convoy. Her tactical officer said, that would be consistent with their position, sir. She said, how much time does the convoy need? Her tactical officer said, based on last logged position, approximately 2 hours to reach the jump point, sir. She said, we engage immediately and push through. She paused. That old ship isn't going to hold us for 2 hours. She gave the order. What the Keth fleet experienced in the next 2 hours, and 7 minutes was not what Sub-Admiral Vethral had projected. The engagement began at standard range. The Perseverance took the first exchanges badly. She absorbed hits that her rated shields struggled with. And the Keth tactical AI updated its assessment at 3 minutes. The Perseverance was losing shield integrity at a rate consistent with destruction in 14 minutes. 14 minutes was not 2 hours. Vethral said, press the formation forward. She's done. The formation pressed. At 7 minutes, the Perseverance did something that Vethral's tactical AI had not projected. It accelerated, not to a higher sustained speed, to a burst speed that was 17% above what the Perseverance's rated maximum should have produced, which put it inside the optimal firing range of the Keth formations. Lead destroyer, before the destroyer could reorient its positioning. The port secondary battery opened at a firing rate that the Keth tactical database did not have recorded for the Perseverance's weapons class. And the destroyer's forward shields took a concentration of fire that the tactical AIS damage projections were wrong about by enough to matter. The Keth formation adjusted. It took 90 seconds to adjust because 90 seconds was how long it took to process an unexpected event, recalculate tactical positions, and transmit updated orders. In those 90 seconds, the Perseverance had moved, not retreated, moved into a position relative to the Keth formation that the Keth tactical AI recognized as suboptimal for the Perseverance. It exposed her to fire from 3 vessels simultaneously. What the Keth tactical AI did not know was that the position was suboptimal according to standard engagement doctrine and optimal according to 3 years of Mensa SAS, running the modified battery calculations by hand. The three-way exposure was manageable if you knew exactly what the Perseverance's shields could actually absorb at each angle, which was information that existed in Voskesna Komura's head and not in any fleet database. The Perseverance absorbed fire from 3 vessels simultaneously for minutes. During those 4 minutes, the Keth formation was focused on a target that was absorbing fire and not moving, and the Keth tactical AI was projecting destruction in 8 minutes. What it was not doing was paying full attention to the Perseverance's torpedo solution, which Mencius had been computing manually for 4 minutes, accounting for the Keth formation's adjustment patterns, identifying the specific moment when the second destroyer's evasive maneuvering would bring it into a firing solution that the standard torpedo guidance systems couldn't have achieved, but that a human calculating trajectories by hand could. The torpedo hit at minute 11. Sub-Admiral Vethral watched her second destroyer take a hit that her tactical AI had calculated was not a possible trajectory. She said, "How?" Her tactical officer said, "I don't know, sir." The firing solution doesn't correspond to the Perseverance's listed torpedo guidance specifications, she said. Listed. Her tactical officer said, "Sir?" She said, "Listed specifications. Specifications from when the ship was built." She paused. 41 years ago. Her tactical officer looked at the Perseverance on her display. Vethral said, "Recalculate our engagement projection. Don't use their listed specifications." She paused. "Use what they've actually been doing for the past 11 minutes. Her tactical officer recalculated. She took 40 seconds. Then she sighed in the quiet tone of someone who had found a number they didn't expect. "Sir, if these observed performance parameters are consistent, the engagement projection changes significantly." Vethral said, "How significantly?" Her tactical officer said, 43 minutes instead of 14. Vethral said, 43. Her tactical officer said, "Yes, sir." She paused. "And that's assuming no further surprises." Vethral looked at the corridor behind the Perseverance and did the calculation that she needed to do 43 minutes minimum, possibly more if there were further surprises. The convoy needed 2 hours from 41 minutes ago, which meant it needed approximately 7 to 9 more minutes. The Perseverance was capable of providing 43 minutes with the current assessment. She said, "Bring up the heavy cruisers. Concentrate fire on the Perseverance's drive system. If she couldn't destroy the ship, she would immobilize it." On the bridge of the Perseverance, at minute 44, Asaya Daimi said, "Drive." Voskesna Komura said, "They got one of the 3 primary conduits. Drive at 60%. She paused. "Commander, we have a problem." He said, "Tell me." She said, "The drive hit also affected the secondary power, coupling for the shield array's port section." She paused. "Port shields are at 31%, and I can't get more to them without rerouting from the weapons systems." He said, "How long to reroute?" She said, 7 minutes. He said, "We don't have 7 minutes without the port shields." She said, "No." He said, "What do we have?" She said, "I can give you full power to port shields in 40 seconds if we go completely dark on the weapons." He said, 40 seconds of no weapons." She said, 40 seconds. He looked at the display. The Keth formation was repositioning. In 40 seconds, the repositioning would put the second heavy cruiser in a direct firing angle on the Perseverance's port side. He said, "Kofi." His tactical officer said, "Already computing, Commander." Paused. "If we go dark on weapons for 40 seconds during their repositioning, the second heavy cruiser gets 1 clean firing solution on our port side before the shields come back." He said, 1 shot. His tactical officer said, 1 shot at a compromised shield array." He paused. "It will hurt." He paused. "It might not kill us." He said, Might. His tactical officer said, 41-year-old ship, Commander. She paused. Might is what we have. Asayadaimi looked at the display. The convoy had needed 2 hours. The Perseverance had been in this corridor for 1 hour and 51 minutes. 9 more minutes, he said. Vasquez Nakamura, 40 seconds. She said, starting now. The weapons went dark. The repositioning put the second heavy cruiser in a direct firing angle at 41 seconds. The shot hit at 43 seconds, 3 seconds before the shields came back. The impact rang through the Perseverance like a struck bell. Emergency systems activated. 3 crew in the port engineering section were down. The lights in the corridor went red. The shields came back at 46 seconds. Vasquez Nakamura said, "Shields at 62% port. Commander." He paused. "We're still here." He said, "Damage." She said, "Port engineering section has a hull breach. Contained." She paused. 3 injured, none critical. She paused. "Drive is still at 60%. She paused. "We're still here." He said, "Kofi, do we have weapons?" His tactical officer said, "Yes, Commander." He paused. "We came back dark for 40 seconds. She paused. "Their formation expected us to be done." He paused. "They're not in optimal positions." He said, "Use it." His tactical officer used the 40 seconds of the Keth formation's confidence against them. The next 7 minutes were the most technically precise combat Asayadaimi had ever witnessed from the inside, his tactical officer, and his weapons teams working the modified battery calculations and the position analysis that the Keth fleet had not modeled, using the information that a 41-year-old ship's crew had accumulated about what the ship could actually do. At minute 59, the lead destroyer broke formation. Not destroyed. Sufficiently damaged that its commander had made the calculation that staying in the engagement was worse than withdrawal. At minute 63, one of the frigates followed. The Keth formation was still larger than the Perseverance. The Perseverance was still losing shield integrity and drive capacity, and the engagement was still going in one direction at the strategic level. But at minute 63, the corridor was open enough. His communications officer said, "Commander, the convoy has reached the jump point." He said, "Confirm." She said, "Confirmed. Sir, they're through." He looked at the display. 1 hour and 3 minutes in the corridor. 11,000 people through the jump point. He said, "Break off. Get us out." The Perseverance broke off. The Keth formation did not pursue. This was a decision Vethral made because pursuing a vessel that had survived 63 minutes and put 2 of her ships out of the fight was a decision that needed to be made carefully. And making it carefully took time she didn't have if she was going to regroup the formation. The Perseverance transited the corridors far and at reduced drive. With a port hull breach and 3 injured crew and shield systems running on rerouted power, at 1 hour and 11 minutes after the engagement began, she came back alone. At Fleet Command's debrief, 3 days later, the operations analysis team spent for hours on the engagement record. At the end of 4 hours, the team's lead analyst said, "There are 23 instances in the engagement record where the Perseverance performed outside the specifications logged for a vessel of her class and age. She pulled each one up. The drive burst, the firing rate, the torpedo trajectory, the 40-second dark period, and the subsequent position exploitation. 23 instances of a ship doing something that her listed specifications said she shouldn't be able to do." She said, "In all 23 instances, the performance corresponds to what the crew knew the ship could do, rather than what the documentation said she could do." She looked at the room. She said, "The Perseverance came back because her crew knew her." She paused. "Not from the specification sheet." He paused. from 9 years and 11 years and 3 years, and the accumulated experience of people who had been on the same ship for long enough to understand what it actually was. She paused. She said, "The recommendation I'm submitting is not about the Perseverance specifically." She paused. "It's about what this engagement demonstrates." She paused. "The value of crew continuity on older vessels is not in operational efficiency metrics." She paused. "It's in this." She paused. 23 instances of a ship surviving because the people on it knew her well enough to push past what the documents said. She looked at the display. The Perseverance was already in the shipyard for repairs. She would be repaired. She would go back out. Her crew would still know her. That was the thing that couldn't be put in a specification sheet. That was the thing that had bought 2 hours